Well, I just want to start off by really appreciating and offering a little bit of gratitude, Teresa, and the Great Cities Institute for inviting me here to participate in this, what has been a very inspiring and exciting couple of days. I also want to acknowledge that my work is very much inspired by my relations, my relatives, my abuelitas, my parents. They have really been a important part of me being able to do what I do, and I just like to always offer a little bit of gratitude for that as well. And so, listening to everyone so far, I think sin querer, without knowing, the threads are here in my talk, what I'm going to do. And I'm going to really try to stick to my script, which I'm not usually good at, but I'm really going to try, because I want to really just use my 15 minutes or less so we can engage in more discussion and knowledge creation here. And my title is the same, but I think I could change it to really acknowledge and connect more to some of the issues that we've already discussed and continue to discuss around issues of public and private space in particular. And I'm going to try to add another level of how we understand that space and those spaces, and try to deconstruct those spaces without getting too postmodern on you. And again, I'm going to really try to stick to the script, but I'm not always good at that. So the title here is Internally Displaced Women in Medellin, Colombia, Food Insecurity, Violence, Health, and Mobility. Colombia is now the country with the highest incidences of forced displacement in the world. By the end of 2010, 5.2 million people have been violently displaced due to the country's long-standing civil war, often through threats of violence, as well as assassinations of family members, massacres, and other confrontations. The city of Medellin is at the epicenter of the area of the country where most people are being displaced, and therefore has received many of the displaced people. So you can see the circles, as the bigger they are, that's where more people are being displaced, and that red X of the black X is Medellin, so it's right there in the mix of it. Over the last 2 summers, I have been working in Medellin, Colombia with internally displaced women. The project was initially focused on food insecurity and redefining food adequacy. But soon after the project started, it was clear that issues of violence, health, mobility were inextricably connected to food insecurity, or could be the other way around. What are the intertwining issues, phenomena that weave through and around food? During drawing on visceral data, which I will explain shortly, I begin to tell the story of this entanglement and verify the value of using visceral methods to obtain data from bodies. The punchline of the story is that in order to study and plan around food security and other planning issues, we need to really examine food, or whatever the area is, housing, transportation, economic. We need to understand the food, body, and place relationships, and the social, political, environmental contexts that surround procurement and all of the other issues that happen around food, cooking, getting, all that stuff. So visceral methods comes out of a process of visceral geography. We're really trying to collect data that is theoretically and methodologically surrounded and by context. So we're focusing on the body, but we're also connecting all of the body to what's happening around it. So we're at the same time trying to pay attention to the structural concerns like the broader political economy and social hierarchies, and lived experiences, embodied feelings, and everyday actions. It is sort of an umbrella concept that connects research on affect, like Nigel Thrift, who does all that work over there on the other side of the pond, feminist ideas of the body politics, and kinetics. How does the body work and move through space? It is basically the notion that folks besides biologists can study the body internally, embodied feelings, emotions, and physicality, but that this study is also contextualized in structural phenomena. Through the use of the body as a geographical space, one seeks data from the body. Visceral geography seeks out the information by offering participants a chance to communicate bodily feelings, moods, sensations, states of being, both verbally, making clear that feelings, sensations are valued topics, and non-verbally through participant reactions, gestures, and expressions while partaking in research activities. The women's stories and knowledge about food and the multiple barriers and opportunities they encounter and devise in their daily quest for food can challenge and at the same time empower planners to develop processes and policies that could improve conditions in cities. Through research events developed in collaboration with the women, we are able to get at the complicated ways that bodies have experienced the forced move from the rural to the urban and the ways that food in relation to violence, health, and mobility. Today, I will share an analysis of a shared sensory experience from Summer 1, multiple body maps and their stories from Summer 2, and one strategy revealed in conversational interviews in Summer 1. This picture series that I'll go through in a second here demonstrates what food does and also expresses the co-creative nature of our work. This is a depiction of a shared sensory experience, a fieldwork event in which 8 women participants, their children, grandchildren, members of the collaborating organization, and the researchers came together to plan for, to shop for, prepare, and eat a meal together. Obviously, all of this was paid for through our research funds. Food did a lot here, did a lot of work. At the most basic level, food is what brought us all together, collaborating and coordinating. It gave us a purpose and a logic for relating to one another. For instance, in the delegation of tasks, it also provided a means through which varied emotional states were tried out and tried on. While we made very traditional dishes, which were all decided on by the women, and which they had made many times before, most of the women had not taken part in a large cooking event like this for some time. Food broke isolation. Bodies celebrated food and celebrated coming together. Women laughed and told jokes. People were taken care of in this space, in this research event. Food was shared happily between women despite continuing underlying concerns and worries about where the next week's meals would come from. But it did more. This picture is from the event, one of the events that we did several of these shared sensory experiences. And it suggests that while food was the medium for expression of multiple experiences and emotions, food was not always or even usually the focal point of conversation. I've come to talk about this photo a lot because it so powerfully tells the emotional side of the story behind the event. This woman was standing around in a group of 6 other women who were intently listening to her personal story of surviving domestic violence and other forms of violence. You can see not only the mark made by the machete used to attack her here, on her arm there, but the intensity with which she chops the cabbage resonates with the force and power she emits as she describes being violently attacked. Meanwhile, the other women sit focused on her story, hearing her, empathizing, and often nodding in understanding and agreement. After she finished, other women shared their stories of abuse and survival. This example suggests that women use food-based spaces to exchange information and communicate, in this case, around domestic violence. Now I'm going to switch to a new methodology that I've just started using this last year called body map storytelling. In body map storytelling, activities is a very intimate methodology. I don't believe that I would have been able to do this the first summer I was there. I needed to develop trust relationships and create a context in which the women felt comfortable sharing painful but also hopeful experiences, ideas, and memories. This series of photos depicts a body map storytelling activity. The women helped each other draw life-size silhouettes of their bodies, and then they responded to questions about their displacement experiences and food insecurity by drawing or other creative expressions on or around their silhouettes. You can see in this photo part of a completed body photo that the artist has pasted a red X over her genital area. She later explained that she was so traumatized by the process of displacement that she stopped having her period. Many of the women drew broken hearts or black hearts or hearts with tears in them about their forced migration to the city. They drew lines around their feet or near their feet. They drew extra feet to describe the experience of walking for many hours or even days in the displacement process. They depicted empty stomachs, pain stomachs. The body is really feeling this process of displacement. One woman drew her lungs and wrote the word dificultad, difficulty. She later described how since coming to the city, she had developed asthma from all the pollution. But you can also see her red heart where she writes fuerza, strength. They demonstrated the emotional stress of not knowing where they would get food, pay for school, or clothes for school. But you can also see the muscle on her arm representing strength, and that food is connected to that strength or needed for that strength. Down there, the food. She kind of has an interesting muscle there. Mm-hmm. So they talked about this activity in general terms, about it making them remember things they had tried to or they had forgotten. But at the same time, we can see the agency that they're demonstrating through many of the hearts as a place of power. They were using these ways to express things that we did not hear in the conversational interviews the year before. So this is a long-term process, I think, that we're trying to engage in here. So in those interviews, the women described many different strategies that they engaged with to get food. One of them is this thing called the recorridos, and part of the process is recognizing that their agricultural skills that they bring are devalued completely in the urban context. These strategies often make them leave their children unattended and vulnerable to urban violence. This recorrido is an energy-intensive form of solicitation where women wake up well before dawn, walk many kilometers over the course of an entire day on defined routes, asking for food donations. These routes take them past dozens of different businesses and private homes, which is where they gather food if they're lucky. Women have described the recorridos as physically depleting and emotionally degrading, as well as dangerous. Through these examples from Medellin, I hope I have demonstrated that this daily search for food and income is interlocked with the threat of violence, negative health outcomes, and social marginalization that comes from being marked as displaced, and the lack of access for financial or other geographic reasons to transportation other than walking, and that these interlocked phenomena are intimately connected to and felt by bodies, and we can obtain information about these phenomena through bodies. So we get to the always asked question, so what? Particularly for planners, so what? What is this? Why is this important for planners? And I think there are really two reasons, at least at this point in my thinking. First is that in urban planning, I feel like the body has been somewhat invisible or ignored. The body feels and has emotions connected to space and process. Planners theorize and study a wide variety of variables in and around cities. Planners use interviews, focus groups, census data, and other large data sets, windshield surveys, GIS, and participant observation to collect and analyze data. But in all this rich data, somehow the body and how it feels and experiences urban space is lost or devalued or not recognized. By using the body as a scale at which we collect data, we will be able to get closer to finding out how the body feels planning. Planning thus far, I suggest, has missed out on this level and way of understanding the impacts and possibilities of its practice. Second, and maybe even more importantly, when we focus on the body and the visceral experiences, we can move beyond, and we'll debate this, the public-private divide that often hinders planning's ability to engage and respond to issues that are intimately related to the body, such as food, violence, health, mobility, but also land use, housing, and economic and workforce development. By examining the body, we necessarily abandon the idea of public space and private space. The body erases those constructs. The body is both private and public. Most of the time, parts of the body are visible and parts of the body are covered up. It moves between and around spaces, different spaces, so we cannot really label it one or the other. This is important because private spaces have traditionally been normalized as women's spaces, that we are, and were, women, invisible to planners because we're so associated with this private space. That's beyond planning's purview. By moving beyond this binary, we give planners permission to study and respond to intimate, important issues in a very intimate way. So, I would love to have a conversation about how we can grasp this information in a way that is meaningful for planners and policymakers. Nice day, my lady.